Motorsport TV Live, brought to you by Motorsport Tickets, the dedicated motorsport experiences provider.
Hello and welcome to Motorsport TV Live. I'm Bryn Lucas. Coming up today, we'll be looking back at the inaugural Extreme E season. We'll have insight from Autosport's Extreme E correspondent Matt Kew, and we'll take a look at how the championship grew over the season and look ahead to 2022. That's all coming up right here on Motorsport TV Live. In 2021, Formula E founder and CEO Alejandro Agag launched his latest series, Extreme E, a brand new series that pairs both female and male drivers in a custom-built all-electric, all-terrain, all-wheel drive SUV referred to as the Odyssey 21, which produces 536 horsepower and launches drivers from 0 to 62 miles per hour in 4.5 seconds. That's impressive, especially given the vehicle weighs over 1.5 tons. Established names in motorsport were quick to support the all-new series. IndyCar and sports car team owners Chip Ganassi Racing and Andretti Autosport confirmed their Extreme E entries, along with 2009 Formula One world champion Jenson Button. But it was two more Formula One world champions who stole the headlines heading into race one, with 2016 world champion Nico Rosberg and his former Mercedes F1 teammate, 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, bringing their own teams to the party. With drivers like Seb Loeb, the 9-time World Rally Champion, the 2-time World Rally Champ Carlos Sainz, F1 champion Jenson Button and Dakar regulars Leia Sanz and Cristina Gutierrez, the season ahead promised excitement and drama from the off. We're here to talk us through the thrills and the spills is Autosport Extreme E correspondent Matt Kew. Well, Matt, thank you very much for joining me. To start with, let's cast our minds back to before 2021. How did it all come about?
Yes, Alejandro Agag's sort of latest disruptive all-electric idea that he had, and it started before my time covering it. It was launched on a ship. The concept, a ship in the River Thames, and one of my colleagues attended, and then it was Agag, and it was very much like a co-venture with Indianapolis 500 winner Gilles de Ferran. He's since sort of dialed back his involvement. And then sort of following on from that, we got a sort of scheduled release of all the teams that were announced and then the drivers. So there were some sort of big names, as you mentioned, Chip Ganassi Racing, or Andretti Autosport, which did a partnership with United Autosport, so Zach Brown. And it was all coming along quite well. And then obviously the pandemic came and affected everything like it does in motorsport. So there's people sort of scaling back resources or not necessarily willing to sort of commit to a brand new series they didn't know much about. So Venturi and HWA pulled out, but Agag, being Agag, jumped on the phone, got some new backers, some new entrants to come in, and then the teams, the drivers being announced as well. As you say, Loeb, Sainz, Johan Kristoffersson, all pucker names. And then, of course, pandemic reared its head, so we had delayed to the calendar, a couple of cancelled round, but then it all launched in Saudi in April with massive amounts of skepticism, I suppose, particularly over how much it put its environmental message front and centre. Yeah, it was watching them race in the desert, as you can see on the screen there. Amazing setting, probably a bit too much dust to make the racing that competitive, but that screenshot there, you've got Kristoffersson, Sainz and Loeb, and that really is your proof of concept that it works. And these cars are enormous. One of the pities, I suppose, about Extreme E is that because it's so remote, you're nowhere near the cars, but when you actually see them up close, they're enormous, and watching them trade paint is a pretty fantastic spectacle.
Yeah, it was created really as a TV championship, wasn't it? It wasn't there for people to go to because it has that ethos of being green or climate friendly or however you want to phrase it. How do you think it's been received as a TV or made for TV championship? I
think good so far is what I'll say. So let's look at the UK. That's the thing we understand the most, where it's shown on ITV1 Sky Sports, BT Sport, and through sort of the web of the BBC iPlayer. Now, my understanding, and Alejandro has actually been quite upfront about this, is that effectively those rights deals were not expensive for the TV broadcasters to acquire. Quite how happy the TV broadcasters are that their main rivals have the same package, I'm not so sure. But it's one of those things that obviously ITV can put out a press release saying they have these deals and it fits in with their carbon neutral status. It was good for TV. That's major coverage. Whether the numbers have been strong enough, like we saw with Formula E, where it was very much on accessible free-to-air TV in its first season, and numbers weren't so good, so it became harder and harder to watch. Whether that will be the same trend in Extreme E remains to be continued. A couple of frustrations as a journalist covering it is that that to make the TV show, a session will happen. A driver might crash, might roll, might say something fantastic, but you can't report on that for a couple of hours until the broadcast is aired. So there's a bit of poetic license. It's not quite as live as is made out, but it's all about getting the eyeballs. The whole mission statement of Extreme E is that, you know, everything this side of David Attenborough that is about the environment, the climate crisis, doesn't interest people. It turns people off. So if we can get people who are interested in motorsport to watch this, and then basically, you know, just filter in the correct messages and get them to change some elements of their lifestyle, then that's the way to do it. You tap into a sports audience rather than an environmental audience. So if that comes to fruition, then, you know, it's an innovative way of doing it. That's why it's attractive partners. And if there's sort of tangible and a tangible outcome from the way it's been presented over TV, then that has to go down as a success, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't worry, I struggle over that word as well. Now then, when we come to the first two rounds, let's go to the inaugural X-Prix, really. It was in Saudi Arabia. You were there. How much were the drivers and the teams really trying to win? How much did it mean to them and matter to them?
I think it means it meant a fair bit, in the sense that, you know, it's a slice of history. Even if Extreme E only lasted one race, to win the first one, the only one, whatever, is a good achievement. You know, it isn't the World Rally Championship. It's not the World Rallycross Championship. And I think you could, you know, read behind, you know, Sebastian Loeb, Johannes Christopherson's sentiment towards that. But it's an impressive feat. You know, a lot of people in this championship because of a gag, and I know it's, you know, it sounds like I'm sort of giving him an easy ride or blowing smoke, but he's an impressive figure, and he's brought that together, and so there's a certain expectation with that it will get a lot of coverage, that it will, you know, be a credible championship. So you want to win it on that respect, and, you know, perhaps we'll talk about Nico Rosberg a bit later, but fair play to him. I was listening to sorry for a slight tangent, listening to a Match Today podcast, and Gary Lineker say, you know, the only thing that ever came close to scoring goals was when, you know, his favourite team, Leicester City, won the league. And I sort of put the similar thing to Nico Rosberg, and he's like, yeah, it's, you know, a tenth of what it's like to race in Formula One, but he still takes excitement from that. He was very media friendly. He was very sort of present, very there. So sort of what went on in team meetings, I'm not 100% sure of, but even if they weren't so impressed, that sort of never filtered through. They towed the party line well.
Yeah, and there were rivalries, F1 rivalries. Jenson Button had a team, as I said before. Lewis Hamilton had a team. Nico Rosberg had a team. So there are some big players with global brands, I suppose, global names in Formula One, but it had the American influence too with Chip Ganassi, with Andretti. So it has a big global reach. How has it been received globally as opposed to just in the UK?
Well, is the short answer. You had round one in Saudi Arabia. And then for round two in Senegal, there were like I did the numbers. There was something like 17 new broadcast partners announced, 6 new series sponsors. All the logos were different on the cars. There were different color schemes. You know, people were interested in sort of the commercial and the marketing. It got people engaged. China is unexpectedly a massive audience for it, so it has sort of tapped into something, and you know, it's worked. It probably works both ways. At European audience, we've probably seen a few drivers, few names that, you know, we weren't necessarily aware of. So in terms of its sort of bigger appeal, because obviously I'm reporting it from, I like watching cars go around in circles. That's why I'm in this job. That's why I'm interested. Extreme E is, you know, forced me to sort of broaden that to, you know, because it has this its secondary purpose with the environment, but also it, you know, forces you to look at things on a sort of more global scale, if you like, because in the time I've been covering Formula E, there's been a pandemic, so it's been again concentrated in Europe. So it has been quite good to see. It's been well received in the countries it's gone to, speaking to locals and stuff like that. So yeah, probably another sort of a tick there.
They tried to cover off quite a few different terrains, didn't they? And also draw awareness to the global side of things with getting the drivers involved in local activities, I suppose. Litter picking on the beach is one that I cast my mind back to. The season finale was here in the UK in Dorset. And when it was announced, I know there was some chuckling amongst people that it was being held at the Bovington Tank Museum. But it wasn't quite as quaint as that. And we saw those conditions. And it was a brilliant finale for a series. I think it showed that over those 5 rounds, it had really grown from something that looked quite cool to something that was actually starting to be a proper championship.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that, although I've been positive on the whole, the standout worst thing about Extreme in its first season was the cars broke. And in the same way, in the last month, it's been very important to separate the job Formula One does from the FIA. It's also important to separate Extreme E from the people that build the car, which is Spark Racing Technology. There's a bit of blurred lines over, they were given a brief and built the car to said brief, and whether that goalpost was then moved because people were pushing for Extreme E to be more, extreme. There's a bit of that's open for debate. But the cars had their problems. But you came to Dorset with a load of new parts to beef them up. It was really good. It was very cold, very wet, very muddy. Jutta Kleinsmith, who she missed one corner and ended up sort of driving a separate loop through a massive puddle. So that was really helpful as I returned to my hire car. That was covered in rubbish thanks to that. But it was quite brutal. Cars still sort of suffering from it. But like you say, this is a proving ground for Challenger tanks. That's another one. Challenger tanks. So for the Extreme E-cars, sort of largely not fail there. It was a pretty grueling course. And good racing. The other downside to Extreme is that I think, bar only Greenland, I think every single time we've had a new rules change, a different format. So you could argue, whether you want to argue that skewed the points table or whatever, that's a fair case. But Extreme E sort of got it right again with 5-car finale in the UK. Lots of passing, overtaking, even though it was a narrow course, and that was all good. The one slight mention I would say where they got it completely wrong in the UK is that there's always been freedom of choice. You have female drivers and male drivers with always the potential to race together, and that was taken away in for the UK. The teams wanted female drivers to start the final, and so worked backwards from there, and that sort of that for me sort of undermined that sort of equality message. But on the whole, a good bedrock to sort of end the season, look to season 2. But now the thing is they need to shore up the finances for a couple of teams. You've got McLaren coming in, but if 2 teams are on the fringes of dropping out, as I understand it, then that's a problem that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, that's always going to be something for essentially what is a start-up championship. You mentioned about the sort of the men and the women equality thing that's going on. Great to have teams made up of a male driver and a female driver. A shame, like you say, of what happened to the Dorset round, where it was almost forced upon the order. But how important is it, do you think, that a championship like this that's getting global awareness, global recognition, has this 50-50 split?
Look, in an ideal world, positive discrimination shouldn't have to exist, but we're so far from that ideal that there needs to be a step taken. It's a simple numbers game. If there are 1,000 young boys entering karting and only 1 female for every 1,000, then the chance of them making it to the top is so much diminished. So despite all the rubbish that was put on social media when this initiative was announced by Extreme, I thought it was a really good thing. This is direct quotes from sort of the likes of Katie Munnings and Christina Gutierrez. But when their teammates are highly decorated, when they're bashing doors with Sebastian Loeb, they're going up, in their words, they're heroes. So that's cool for any young driver. And on the whole, I think it worked well. It's not about exposing, differences in lap times or anything like that. What it is about creating role models. It's elevating people to a higher status. So, at Dorset in the UK, you've got a group of FIA girls on track, the sort of program there, and you have 7 or 8-year-olds talking to Sarah Price, and then they see her, get 10 feet of air over a jump. That's aspiring people, and so, for me, Extreme E has to fulfill that purpose. And that's why I was slightly peeved that they sort of undid that equal footing that they really give. And I think it's also important to mention that there was a massive improvement in the lap times of the females compared to the males, but a few sort of ones I would point out: Sarah Price, who is a match for anyone all year, and then Michaela Arlen Kotulunski and Christine Gianpaolo Zonka. They both were sort of quicker than their teammates, sort of just on merit, and so that's probably worth shouting about.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, before we finish this, we should look to 2022. Now, 2021 had a few cancellations, as you say, COVID background. As we head into 2022, there is a COVID issue still. It's not gone away, sadly. In fact, it's reared its ugly head even further. So what do we expect from 2022 with a calendar? Everything so far on the Extreme E calendar is TBC. So when are they going to, BC it? When's it going to be announced?
It will be announced after the new year, is what I'm hearing. Like say, few COVID cancellations. That last race should have been in Argentina, but instead I'm still washing the sort of Dorset mud out of my clothes. But that's very much a first world problem. Calendar for next year is interesting. It's 5 rounds still, but Extreme E has released a provisional one with 12 locations on it, and that doesn't include the Outer Hebrides in Scotland, which received a £1 million grant from Rishi Sunak in his latest budget. So 13 locations for a 5-round calendar, and I asked Alejandro Gag, why do that? That doesn't look very clever. And he was quite upfront, drew some criticism, but he said, well, I want the highest bidder. So there's one date where there's 4 nations sort of cup tied to host it, and his ploy is that one of those sees the other 3 and thought, I had the exclusive rights to that, and Alejandro said no, that was never the case, and goes, right, open a checkbook. And it's no coincidence that we're racing in Saudi Arabia and the season opens there, because that earns money and that can pay for a lot of the season to come after that. And Saudi Arabia will again remain the season opener in a different location. It won't return to Alula. It will return to it will move to a new place, which I probably shouldn't say, but it's a straight line road, which is quite famous in Saudi Arabia. It will go there, and then the rest of the calendar will slot into place. Alejandro was only in the UK on Sunday for the final race because he was in talks in Saudi Arabia about finding different dates if COVID restrictions in the UK force travel restrictions. And then from there, I think it will be, I wouldn't be surprised if they took sort of a leaf out of formulary's book and announced races in batches, because then instead of having to put out a depressing statement saying you've cancelled 6 or 3 or whatever, then you can actually go, no, these are the ones set in stone. And then the other one that hasn't featured, but Nepal or in the Himalayas is a destination they want to get to. The only slight difference with that is it's like it's a very difficult road to get there. The ship can't get there. But again, when the people at the top of this championship have an idea and people say no, that doesn't really tend to factor in too much. So 5 rounds still. We'll get a shortlisted calendar soon, and McLaren are joining, but 2 teams possibly exiting, and a lot of the high-profile drivers are sticking around, and that's probably a good measure of the success. Obviously, they're getting paid, and it's good exposure for them. But also, it's Sebastian Loeb. He's a 9-time world rally champion. He can either gracefully go into retirement, do his own thing, but the fact is that he'll still be there next season. Is probably again to use that phrase, a proof of concept that it worked.
Yeah, well, given that he's announced that he's going to be racing in the opening round of the World Rally Championships, he's going nowhere. Look, Matt, thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And we are going to be watching 2022 season with, I think, with open eyes, trying to keep our eyes on what happens over the next few months.
Brilliant. Thanks, Bryn.
Great stuff. Well, that's all we've got time for. Thanks very much to Matt. I'm Bryn Lucas. Join us again here on Motorsport TV Live for more season reviews and roundups. We'll see you again very soon.